I do want to recognize, as we talk about apartheid-free communities, both the urgency of this moment and the need for people to do everything we can to end the horrific genocide, and the very real need not to just focus on the violence of this moment, but to recognize the deep-seated and historic structural violence that undergirds it. And so the Apartheid Free Initiative seeks to address these root causes of Palestinian oppression, and it seeks to address them based very specifically on what Palestinians have said the international community can do for them. It was a Palestinian civil society that asked the international community to name their situation as apartheid, really speaking truth in the midst of a lot of lies and misinformation and propaganda. And second, to create apartheid-free zones, spaces that, to the extent we are able, we are actively seeking to cut ties with Israeli apartheid. I want to recognize that apartheid is not the only frame to understand what's happening in Israel, and indeed with what's happening in Gaza. The settler colonial project really creates a powerful framework for the ways in which Palestinian people have been forced off their land and Palestinian land is shrinking. And we see in Gaza this playing out in real life as the whole Gaza Strip that in this photo in 2025 was green, was Palestinian land. It is very rapidly being taken actively, violently from the Palestinian people. And a recognition that apartheid is the structural frame, the legal framework in which this settler colonial project is taking place. So again, just to and to recognize that back in 1948, when Israel was founded, the way in which it was founded by linking religion to citizenship, it was founded as a state that really created two identities of people: a Jewish people, which became citizens, and a non-Jewish people, which would not have citizenship and therefore a different and inferior status. And this creation really culminated in 2018. The nation state law was enacted, which really codified into law Jewish supremacy for all of the people living within the state of Israel. So I have that just as a backdrop as we enter into the need to name Israeli apartheid. I want to recognize that in naming Israeli apartheid, there actually is in international law a very specific definition of what apartheid is. And that's what I'm using, that's what Apartheid Free is using, and that's what the international community is using when they talk about Israeli apartheid. Apartheid can be described, is described by the International Council on the Supremacy and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid as inhumane acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group of persons over any other racial group of persons and systemically oppressing them. Now, with this definition, there are three decisive conditions in which need to be met for something to be recognized internationally as apartheid. And the first is the intent to maintain domination by one racial group or another based on race, creed, or ethnicity. And this maintaining domination takes place certainly with primarily with identity cards that control key rights like being able to vote, like being able to move, where people can live and travel, what roads they can use, who they can marry. Those are just some of the some example of the ways in which this domination is structured. Second, systemic oppression by one over another. And this again recognizes the Israeli state, the basic the nation state law that affirms citizenship for certain groups of people and not for other, but also supremacy, right? Because there are Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, but there are dozens of laws that don't even let them have the same amount of rights as Jewish citizens. And then, of course, that doesn't account for those who have even less rights than Palestinian citizens of Israel, such as people who live in Jerusalem, and then people who live in the West Bank have fewer, and of course, and Gaza has even fewer, and then the Palestinian diaspora as well, who doesn't have the right to return to the lands of their people. The third condition is human rights violations that are part of that oppression. And this takes place through demolitions, through confiscation of land, through forcible transfer, through denial of residency rights in Jerusalem, lack of recognition of Bedouin villages, arrests of children, military prosecution, torture of prisoners, the siege on Gaza, and everything that's happening now. I'm going through this rather quickly, but I do want to set the stage that the Apartheid Free Communities is really based in international law. And we also are recognizing that we are in a moment of time, particularly since 2021 and 2022, where there is international consensus on all the major human rights organizations that Israel is practicing apartheid based on this international definition. Some of these reports include Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, B'Tselem, who is a Israeli human rights organization. In addition to these, we have Palestinians themselves who have long said their condition was apartheid, but Al-Haq, their human rights organization, has named apartheid. Christian communities such as Kairos Palestine and the Global Kairos for Justice community have named Israeli apartheid. South Africans, again, who have long seen the parallels, have also very publicly made claims, not just currently for genocide, but for apartheid, as those who have known and have seen. And finally, the United Nations has also named Israeli apartheid. So if Israeli apartheid is agreed on by human rights organizations, we have a clear definition, and what's happening in Palestine fits what's the definition of apartheid. It raises the question of what we're going to do about it. And this question is for the international community broadly, but it's also very specifically for the Christian community because Palestinian Christians have reached out to the international Christian community to say, where is your witness? Do we not believe in the same God of freedom, of justice, of equality? And if we do so, and if we're living under apartheid, then what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to help us? How can we together manifest this work of the God of liberation? And so in September of 2022, following all of these human rights reports that came out, a gathering of representatives from all the major denominations, Christian denominations in North America came together to say, what is the role of the church in this moment? And how can we respond very specifically to the dossier on Israeli apartheid? And this, I have it right here because this is kind of the foundational text for Christians in this call for a response to what we can do. And this gathering decided to create a pledge that again is in response to Palestinian civil society asking for apartheid-free zones and Palestinian Christians saying, name our situation as apartheid and take action against it. And so a pledge was created. And I want to say from the beginning that the pledge was never meant exclusively to be for Christian communities. It was always meant to pull together people of all faiths, people of conscience. But I do want to acknowledge that it began by a gathering of ecumenical leaders. So what is the pledge? The pledge says, we affirm our commitment to freedom, justice, and equality for the Palestinian people and all people. We recognize we need to name Palestinian people in the moment because they do not have freedom, justice, or equality. They desperately need it, and we can help them in the process of getting it. And we want to recognize that this isn't an exclusive reality for Palestinians, because throughout history, there and even today, there are all the people that are in desperate need of freedom, justice, and equality. And so this commitment, while we name the Palestinian people, is a commitment really to all people. We oppose all forms of racism, bigotry, discrimination, and oppression. And here I want to be very clear that anti-Semitism, that Islamophobia, that anti-Arab sentiment are all forms of racism, bigotry, discrimination, and oppression. And so we oppose all of them. 3, we declare ourselves an apartheid-free community. And here I want to lift up that word community. It is very important for us in creating this pledge that it not be an individual pledge, but it be a collective pledge, that individuals can name Israeli apartheid, and that's useful. But what's really useful is when they go back to their communities, to people they know, to their collectives, especially in churches when we have these shared values, and they work to educate their community so that a community can stand together in naming Israeli apartheid. And so because of what we affirm, because of what we oppose, we declare ourselves an apartheid-free community, and to that end, we pledge to join others in working to end all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. And this last line of the pledge, I just want to be very clear, the language comes directly from Palestinian civil society saying, this is the language that we want you to use. This is the language that reflects our reality, and that for you to stand in solidarity with us, we want you to really name these 3 root causes and how they work together to create our oppression. So even as we name Israeli apartheid, recognize the ways in which it is entrenched in the settler colonial project that Israel has and its military occupation. So this is the pledge, but let me unpack it a little. There are 3 commitments that this pledge asks communities to participate in. 1, it is a pledge to name Israeli apartheid, to say very clearly, to say very publicly that Israel is engaged in apartheid based on international law and the consensus of international human rights organizations. 2nd, it's a pledge to take action. It's not just enough to name Israeli apartheid, but we have to do something about it. We have to work to cut our ties with apartheid. Now, what does this look like? The pledge does not dictate what it looks like, but we provide all types of examples and ways in which different communities have done this. And we basically ask communities to do the work of deciding for themselves what it would look like to live out this pledge in your context, with your resources, with your voice. What is yours to do? And I'll explain a little bit further some of the different ways in which that gets lived out. But I want to be clear that to sign this pledge, it doesn't necessarily entail you do X, Y, and Z, but it entails you do what you can to take action to ties with Israeli apartheid. And then 3, the third thing that this pledge commits you to is to participate in a larger network of communities that are supporting one another and working together. Okay, so you're not doing this on your own, you're not isolated, you're part of a network, a growing, rapidly growing network of communities taking action, and these communities can communicate with each other, can share ideas with one another, can draw support from one another, and can find ways to act in collaboration Depending on what your ways to live out the pledge are, you can find other folks that you can work with to amplify what you're doing. There are a few things I want to say about this pledge before I unpack it a little more. And that is, again, just to reiterate that this pledge came out based on and in response to the direct ask of both Palestinian civil society and Palestinian Christians to the international church. The second, this is rooted in nonviolent active resistance to apartheid and deep solidarity with Palestinian people who have long been working for their liberation. Third, I want to recognize that this pledge is aspirational. I'm speaking to you in the United States from the unceded territory of the Ohlone people, the Chechnya-speaking Ohlone people. I know that my country, as well as yours, are deeply rooted in this settler colonial in our own settler colonial projects. And so I want to be clear that one, we have our own work to do here in our own context and culture and with our own history, even as people elsewhere are calling us to help them. But then two, to recognize, and this is especially true as a citizen of the United States, that I can never fully cut ties and be completely non-complicit to what's happening in Israel-Palestine right now when my tax dollars are funding the work that they're doing, when my politicians are actively supporting the work they're doing. But what I can do is I can work to cut ties. And I can work as part of a movement that collectively is cutting ties and moving toward the work of truly ending Israeli apartheid in collaboration with and following the lead from Palestinians. And so this aspirational piece is really, really important and really humbling, much like I like to claim that I am an anti-racist and engaged in anti-racism work. What is more accurate is that I'm a recovering racist, and I use the vision of becoming anti-racist as my aspirational goal to continue doing the work to get there. This pledge is also aspirational. And finally, I want to say that the idea of creating this pledge is deeply rooted in the role specifically of the church in both South Africa, specifically the church, to end both South African apartheid and Jim Crow apartheid in the United States, recognizing the role of people of faith in general and churches that played a significant role in naming the moral the moral significance of what's happening with apartheid and in challenging the status quo. That the role of the church to speak clearly and prophetically into other systems of apartheid has been extremely powerful in the work of ending apartheid again, in my context in the United States, certainly, and in South Africa. Not that the work is done and we don't have to continue challenging the legacy of apartheid, but likewise, we're seeking to really move people of faith and Christians in this context to speak very morally and very clearly as a way to help move the needle and as a way to acknowledge what we uniquely can do with who we are as a body. So I mentioned that we began as apartheid-free churches, really, and we very quickly expand to apartheid-free congregations. We have synagogues, we have mosques, we have several interfaith congregations that have all taken the pledge, and we've moved far beyond people of faith to people of conscience as well. So this is a multi-tiered pledge. With the recognition that everyone should do the work to create apartheid-free zones. And different communities have specific additional layers of reasons why they need to do this work and framing from which we speak. And I say that because very specifically Christian communities have this need to challenge Christian Zionism. You know, one of our unique roles in working to challenge Israeli apartheid is to challenge the ways in which Christianity has been used, has been twisted, has been maligned to support Israeli apartheid. And so we have our own voice to use and role to play in this effort. What does it mean to take the apartheid-free pledge? It means that you take action, and I'm going to give you three main categories of action that different communities frequently engage in. And again, with the recognition that every congregation, every community has to find their own way to live out the pledge. The first category is education. Changing the narrative, really naming truth, speaking truth. One congregation, one Canadian congregation that I know simply has created an apartheid-free lawn sign in front of their church so that everyone who drives by sees that they're an apartheid-free congregation. And that's one of the ways of changing the narrative and of educating the larger community, even educating their own partners. And we have a ton of resources, educational materials on our website. A second main category of ways to take action is to engage in advocacy, changing policies and practices, appealing to public officials, appealing to cities and counties and states, and seeking those who have political power and seeking to move them so that they can use their political power to work to end Israeli apartheid. And third, economic activism. And this is where boycotts are so important. This is where divestment is so important, and ways in which we can really engage in non-cooperation with the money that funds and supports Israeli apartheid. And these three categories, they're not mutually exclusive in any way, and many folks do a little bit of each, but I name all three of them to recognize that there are multiple strategies and ways to engage in taking action. And I also want to note that they're not really in a hierarchy. That if you have the capacity to move economically, fabulous, do it. If you have the capacity to move politically, fabulous, do it. If you have the capacity to simply work to change the narrative, speaking truth and challenging Israeli propaganda is a powerful way to challenge and work to cut ties with Israeli apartheid. When it comes to deciding for your community, for your context, what it means to live out the pledge, we encourage you to be creative. There are countless ways in which you can engage in this work. Again, there's no one right way to do it. And we ask you to think about what is your unique voice? What are your unique skill sets? Who do you have access to? How might you be able to leverage who you are specifically in this work that has hundreds of different communities doing a variety of different things. So don't be overwhelmed by what you aren't or what you feel like your community can't do. What specifically can your community do, and how can you develop that, and choose one thing or choose a few things that you're already connected to take the next step. And then as you continue to live out the pledge, you can expand more fully. And then finally, I want to note that support is here, that we have a team that is working to support all of our communities when it comes to what it means to live out the pledge. If they're facing any type of attack or discrimination or public challenge, that we have this large network that is standing together and willing to support one another, both in discerning what to do and taking action, and in supporting one another in the actions that we take. And then finally, I just want to give a little bit of who is this apartheid-free network? We currently have about 415 communities who have already taken the pledge. And of these communities, let me recognize that these signers include Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, and interfaith congregations and organizations. And they also include secular and community groups. To give you a feel for numbers, of these 415 communities, about 175 are communities of faith, and 78 of them right now are full congregations for our denomination level organizations. And again, they include a wide spectrum of faith backgrounds. And then I also want to say we have about 140 solidarity organizations, justice centers, nonprofits who have taken the pledge. Groups like we have, lots of justice groups, lots of Palestine solidarity groups, but campus groups, veterans groups, immigration rights groups. We even have high school groups that have chosen to take the pledge to name Israeli apartheid. And then we have about 100 other groups that range from businesses and bookstores to art collectives, community banks, restaurants, all kinds of all kinds of different folks that have found the pledge language and have said, "Wow, this is something we want to commit to, so that we can be part of this movement." And while the pledge originated in and focuses on North America, I do want to recognize that right now it includes over 20 countries, including international organizations. And that's just a testament to the ways in which the pledge has spread far and wide beyond its original intention, and how we're able to really expand the network. And so let me just name, I did a quick count today, and 7 of our signatories at the moment are specifically Canadian signatories. I know that there are more that are international or throughout North America, but just to give a shout out to our Canadian partners in Montreal, we have Free 99 Records. In Vancouver, we have a Jewish congregation, and we have Davening Liberation Oraciones, and we also have Trinity Grace United Church. And then with Toronto as their center, we have, of course, the United Network for Justice and Peace in Palestine, Israel. So excited to have you recognized in this way. We have Bathurst United Church and the Palestine Network Shining Region. And then in Calgary, the Muslim Council of Calgary has signed the pledge. So that kind of gives you a feel for the diversity of folks who've signed the pledge. A lot of people, when they hear the list, say, well, why hasn't this group signed the pledge? Or why hasn't this group signed the pledge? And really, that's because we're a grassroots organization really focused on word of mouth. And so as different communities learn of the pledge and work to sign it, they then share with others, and we continue to grow and grow. To give you a feel for North America, on our website, you can find an updated map of where the different communities are. And you can even go to your own area and zoom in and find all the communities in your network. And we try to keep this updated bi-monthly or monthly at least, so that you can see the growing number of communities who've signed. So that gives you that gives you kind of the background, what we're about, what it means to sign it, what it commits you to. But I do want to stop now and open up for questions.
Thank you so much, Allison. We have about 5-10 minutes for questions. Is that? Yeah.
That's perfect. And let me also just give a shout out that our website, you may have shared this already, but apartheid-free.org has fabulous FAQs to explain regular questions, has great resources, has like a 4-page list of ways in which you can consider taking action, lists all the communities. So that is a powerful resource to check out. But please, what questions might you have?
Thank you for your presentation. It's very exciting and want to listen to it more. And I'm wondering if you can tell me, the American Friends Service Committee, have they signed on?
Yes, and I should have started with that. So American Friends Service Committee actually convened this gathering. And they have played a central role in pulling folks together to build up this community. And I'm actually employed by American Friends Service Committee.
Thank you. You have a requirement for a governing body decision in order for a congregation to be determined to be apartheid free.
We actually get this question a lot, and the truth is that every community has their own governing process for making this decision. And so whenever any community can say, we want to speak collectively to take this pledge, then they simply go to our website and sign the pledge. So we welcome all communities that are willing to sign on to this language. And some communities, a strong pastor can say, we're going to take this pledge and do it, and then reach out to the congregation. Others work by consensus and need full education. And sometimes it can take months and months for my own congregation's in its second year of discernment on this, because we want every single person to be on board with it, and everything in between. So depending on the governing body of your denomination, of your congregation, of your organization, that's the process you would need to go through for someone to speak with someone to have authority to sign the pledge on behalf of your community.
The question for Andapi, and then has Andapi asked the United Church of Canada to become an apartheid free community? And or what would that take for us to do that? Us as well.
Yeah. So we're going to have United Church folks speaking to us, staff speaking to us soon. So we'll ask the question.
I want to say that's fab. If that's the question you're asking, then my work is done. Then y'all know what the pledge is about, what it means to take action, and now as a collective body, what does it mean to go to your denomination to say, what would it take for us to pass this? And here's why it's so important to pass this, based on our faith, based on our values, based on our responsibilities as an international community.
Hi, Alison, this is Dalia. I just want to say that for grade grade, what we did is we had an AGM for the church, and one of the church members put it in as a motion to become an apartheid-free church, and then in the AGM, that was the board discussed it, and then it was moved to the congregation, and the congregation basically voted on it. So that's how we made that decision to become an apartheid-free community. So every event we have, right, as the United Church, so we're affirming, we are reconciling, and we add it as we are also apartheid free. So at any event that we do, we say we add apartheid free, and it's been very engaging. I think we gained new people, but we've also lost some people, and I think this is good to have the whole congregation support, because you will have pushback, and not from maybe the congregation, but maybe for people who use this space and they don't like what they see. So it's good. And then we also have a subcommittee, a apartheid free committee, that we make decisions, it's based on needs. What do we want to do, or an opportunity that rises? So it's great. And like Alan said, I mean, Davening Liberation Australia are partners, so they also became apartheid free. Christians for Free Palestine DC are also partners, so they again Apartheid Free. So it's, you know, people see it, people like it, and then they go ahead and do it, and it's great. So if you need any help or even materials, let us know, and we're happy to share how we did it also on our website and everything on that end.
And my apologies, Christians for Free Palestine should have been on my list of Canadian signatories. And I think in the confusion of the US and the Canadian group, both of who've signed now, I didn't update that in my search, but we are very proud of Christians for Free Palestine Canada too.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hombach, and I'm from Hamilton, Michigan. My question is, in recognizing we need to follow the language of Palestinian activists and communities to say new liberation, I'm also wondering, you know, given the connectedness of the struggle with apartheid in South Africa against anti-Black racism, how has Apartheid Free Zone centered or had participation and leadership of historically Black churches, and how do you also specifically address, or do you address anti-Black racism as you in these campaigns that not exist?
So let me answer the question to the best I heard it, but feel free to add more if I didn't quite get it all. But with the question of apartheid against African Americans, specifically in the United States where it was codified, we have several of our Black churches, Black orgs, and leaders are really leading the way in naming those connections most clearly, and in being very clear that this is not just a pledge against Israeli apartheid, but it's against the legacies of apartheid in all places. We do have, we do have a great Journeys to Justice Bible study that links Palestinian struggles with Black struggles. And FOSNA just put out a great, they just had a delegation of African Americans traveling and linking those causes. And we are in the process of working on a very specific webinar highlighting the distinctions, but several of our Black leaders, especially in the United States, have been especially some of the elders have talked about what it's like to grow up in Jim Crow apartheid and then travel to Israel, Palestine, and experience not just similar things, but in some ways worse things. I don't want to speak on their behalf, and I don't want to speak about experiences that I haven't had, but hearing them powerfully speak is just a reminder of the work we need to do in so many different contexts, and turning to folks who have experienced apartheid and allowing them to have the ability to make these connections most fully, so that we can support the freedom, justice, and equality, yes, of Palestinian people and of all people, is central to the work we're doing.
Great. I think we need to end at this point. Allison, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion and commitment to this work, and for your support as we move more and more into becoming apartheid-free communities. So thank you very, very much.